Imagine you're a professional cricketer. You've trained for years to get here. You're in the middle of a crucial bilateral game with World Cup qualification on the line, and you get given out LBW. You know the ball was going down the leg. You know it. Your teammates know it. Even the opposition also probably knows it. But there's no DRS, no challenge, no review. You just have to walk off. That's not a hypothetical. That is the reality for women's cricketers in bilateral series across the world right now in 2026. Today, we'll be talking about one of the most glaring double standards in modern cricket, the DRS problem. Why it's still not universal in women's cricket, what it's costing players, and why the way it's currently used might actually be making things worse. Quick background for anyone new to cricket technology. The Decision Review System, or DRS as it's commonly known, is a suite of tools that allows players to challenge on-field umpiring decisions. It includes ball tracking technology like Hawkeye to predict LBW trajectories, Ultra Edge and Snickwood to detect faint edges, and Hotspot to identify where the ball made contact. In men's test cricket, it's been a fixture since 2009, over 15 years. And the data on why it matters is pretty damning. Research from the University of Chicago in 2015 analyzed over 1,200 challenge decisions and found that around 26% of on-field umpire decisions that were reviewed got overturned, more than 1 in 4. And when it came specifically to LBW calls, on-field umpires were interestingly found to be biased against batters, consistently giving them out when the ball wasn't necessarily hitting the stumps. DRS was only introduced into women's cricket at the 2017 Women's World Cup, and even then, it only came in for ICC tournaments. The moment that tournament ended, the players went back to playing bilaterals with no DRS at all. The ICC's own rules state that the use of DRS in women's bilateral series is entirely optional and left to the discretion of the home board. And the reason for that, according to the ICC's then General Manager of Cricket, Jeff Allardyce, is fairly blunt. It's up to each board. They can use it. It just comes down to the level of coverage that they mount for the women's matches. In other words, it costs money, and most boards haven't been willing to spend it. Cricket Australia only introduced DRS for women's bilateral games in 2022. South Africa's decision to not use it in their test against England as recently as in December 2024 was described as a cost-cutting measure. Cricket South Africa's Director of National Teams said their resources were being directed at white ball formats instead. And India, they've been playing bilaterals at home, one of the richest cricket boards in the world, without consistently providing DRS for their women's team. The players themselves haven't been quiet about it and have been saying this for years. In 2019, Mithali Raj, arguably India's greatest ever batter, called it out directly in the ODI series at home against England. We would love to have DRS. When it comes to big events, we have it. We need experience with it. But suddenly in bilateral series, we don't. That's the key problem. Players are expected to master a technology they barely get to use. Heather Knight was equally direct after the 2019 Women's Ashes, when England batter Fran Wilson was given out LBW of what replays clearly showed was her glove, not her pad. No DRS, no recourse. You always want the best as players, and DRS is the best. I'd imagine the reason, as usual in women's cricket, is money. Matthew Mott, the Australian coach at the time, put it simply. If you've got the technology there, and you've got enough cameras, it should come in. These aren't fringe voices we're talking about. These are the biggest names in the sport. Captains, coaches, legends, all saying the same thing. And yet, here we are. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and quite frankly, a bit maddening. Because having DRS only at ICC tournaments doesn't just fail to solve the problem. In some ways, it creates a new one. Think about it from a player's perspective. You spend most of your professional cricket career playing bilateral series with no DRS. No experience of when to review, when to trust your instincts, and when to hold back. You build certain habits around playing without it. And then, it's the World Cup all of a sudden. The biggest stage. And now you have the DRS too. But you're expected to use it well under pressure in matches that could define your career. And it's not just the players who suffer. The umpires do too. Women's cricket has been actively building a female umpiring pathway, and that's genuinely good news. The 2025 Women's World Cup featured an all-female officiating panel, and that was the first time ever. Brilliant! Except, when you dig into the numbers, a different picture emerges. At the 2023 Men's World Cup, 12 out of the 16 umpires were drawn from the ICC's elite panel, the most experienced officials in the world. For the Women's World Cup, that same level of experience simply didn't exist yet. The women officiating at last year's World Cup had been fast-tracked into the biggest stage of them all with limited experience. Of the 10 umpires who performed TV duties through the course of this World Cup, Only 3 have officiated as TV umpire in more than 20 matches with DRS available. LB Sheridan, Kim Cotton, and Sue Redfern. There were 3 umpires who had never previously been a TV umpire in an ODI that used DRS. Candice Laborde, N. Janani, and Sara Dambanevana. And once again, one of the key reasons they lack that experience? The sporadic use of DRS in women's cricket. You can't develop fluency with the technology you're barely allowed to operate. Call it recency bias, but there were several instances that come to mind from the last event that potentially cost teams a crucial win. Arguably, none more so important than Heather Knight's dismissal. Facing a fiery Marufa Akhtar first up, Heather Knight seemed to have nicked one through to the keeper. At least that's what on-field umpire Claire Polosak thought. On being reviewed, the TV umpire Gayatri Venugopalan noted that there was no conclusive evidence to confirm that the ball had touched the bat and then promptly went on to overturn the on-field decision. For the uninitiated, the rules state that if the third umpire has no conclusive evidence pointing one way or another, the on-field decision will be sustained. Heather Knight later had another reprieve of Fahima Khatun. On 13 at the time, the former English skipper chipped one from the leggy towards Shorna Akhtar, stationed at cover. Being a low catch, the on-field umpire sent it upstairs just to confirm its veracity. By Knight's own admission, the catch looked clean and she thought that she was out. But the third umpire was heard saying that there is inconclusive evidence to determine whether the catch was clean or not, and deemed it not out. She later went on to score an unbeaten 79 and steered England out of choppy waters to an edgy 4-wicket win. One can make a very strong case that had Knight been adjudged out in either of those reviews, Bangladesh would have pulled off an amazing win, and both those calls would have gone the bowler's way on most other days. The thing we need to understand is that the consequences of these calls go beyond a dismissal or a result. Sticking to the same tournament, teams placed 5th or 6th were awarded INR 5.8 crores, approximately $600,000, while those finishing 7th or 8th received INR 2.3 crores, approximately $250,000. Not to forget, ICC had also announced another INR 28 lakhs, which is approximately $30,000, to a team's total earnings for every group stage win to ensure that there was a financial incentive linked to consistent performances. Bangladesh ended the World Cup placing 7th in the group stage, only 1 point behind the 6th place New Zealand. A win against England, if nothing else, would have led to an additional financial gain of about INR 3.8 crores, approximately $380,000 in total. For a team whose players earn no more than 14.4 lakh Bangladeshi taka, which is about $12,000 or 11.2 lakhs Indian rupees, a windfall of this scale would have helped them enforce some systemic changes. So, the system is failing both the players and the officials at the same time. And when you put inexperienced players and inexperienced umpires together at a high-pressure tournament with DRS, one shouldn't be surprised with the kind of decisions and reviews we got to see at the showpiece event. The main defense boards give is cost. And I do want to keep my biases in check here and be practical. Women's cricket is still a growing sport in many countries and resources aren't infinite. I get that. But let's dig a bit deeper. The estimated cost of deploying DRS technology for a bilateral series is in the range of tens of thousands of dollars, not millions. Meanwhile, we've seen the Women's Premier League sell its media rights for $951 million over 5 years. Sale of the 100 franchises last year generated significant fees for the ECB, and broadcast deals for women's cricket are growing year on year. Sadly, the boards that are refusing to fund DRS for bilateral women's matches are often the same boards that are simultaneously investing heavily in new leagues, new broadcast deals, and new commercial partnerships for women's cricket. If you can sell the women's game as a premium product, and you clearly can, you have to fund the women's game as a premium product too. You know what they say about having your cake and eating it too, right? What's the solution then? The most obvious one is the ICC mandating DRS for all women's international cricket, not just tournaments. Just like they should do for men's bilateral cricket too, quite frankly. If that's not immediately feasible everywhere, then ICC should at the very least fund DRS deployment for all full member bilateral matches. The ICC takes a share of revenue from World Cups where DRS is deployed. It's not unreasonable to ask them to fund the infrastructure that makes those tournaments more meaningful. Another way of doing this, and this is coming more from a place of reaching a middle ground. If a simplified DRS model can be used with fewer cameras, maybe just ball tracking and no hotspot, the services can be availed at a significantly reduced cost, enough to catch the egregious errors. For what it's worth, some boards are already exploring this. There's a big picture argument too, one about what the lack of DRS says on how women's cricket is valued. Every time a board decides that women's matches don't need the same officiating standards as a men's match, they're sending a message to the players. It might not be intentional, but it sure as hell lands. Goes without saying, it's not all gloomy for women's cricket and its stakeholders. The sport is genuinely in its golden era. Stadiums are filling, broadcast rights are selling, young girls are growing up with role models on their screens. The game has never been bigger. But a sport that talks about fairness and integrity every single day cannot justify giving its women players fewer rights to correct a wrong decision than their male counterparts. It cannot justify sending umpires into World Cups without the experience they need. And it cannot keep hiding behind a cost argument when the revenues are there. DRS should not be viewed as a luxury. It is the minimum standard that professional cricket owes to the people who play it. So, the next time you're watching a women's bilateral game and an umpire raises their finger on a ball that's going down the leg and the batter has no way to challenge it, remember that it's not bad luck. It's a choice that was made somewhere in a boardroom, and it's a choice that can be unmade. If you enjoyed watching this, please make sure you've hit the like button, share it with your friends and subscribe to Women's Cricket Central. We cover stories in the sport that don't always make the headlines. Also, drop a comment below. Do you think the ICC should mandate DRS across all women's cricket? I'd love to know what you think. Until then, it's a goodbye from me.